Hello, everybody. Wow, we've got a big crowd here tonight. I'm so thrilled to have you all here. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Shannon Simpson. I'm the executive director for Monterey Audubon Society. And we are here tonight with Jake from Monterey Peninsula Regional Parks District, who is going to be talking about Palo Corona, which was the restoration of the Rancho Cañada Floodplain. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping things. You are welcome to have all the snacks and drinks and stuff you want during the lecture. If you want to get up and get something out, refill your plate, you can do that in the lecture. Restrooms are through the door over here if you need that. I'll probably keep the door open tonight. Hopefully that gets a little bit of a breeze going through here. And then we have a big poster in the back that you might have seen on your way in. That is the brand new logo for our Human Skull Monitoring Project. Deb's holding it up in the back. So congratulations to Tessa Wells, who designed that and won our contest to design the new logo. We will have stickers here shortly in the next week or two, and then we're going to start getting some other swag with that logo made on it. We do have our swag in the back. We have our newsletter sign up in the back if you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet. And then Lulu, did you want to come say hello about our new Jaywalkers Club? I'll let her talk about it for a second. And then we'll pass it over to Jake.
Hello, how's everybody doing today? Good, I hope. Yes. My name's Lulu. I just moved to Monterey a few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago, and I came on a walk and realized that we are missing a few young people out here, and I see that represented today. I would like to see more people my age around here. So I talked with Deb and with Shannon, and we created a new club called the Jaywalkers, named after our beautiful scrub jays here. And if you know of any 20 or 30-year-olds, or you yourself or a 20 or 30-year-old, please scan this QR code. You can join our club, and we will be doing fun things like bird game nights, and we'll be joining with the CSUMB Birding Club to do some events. So if you know anyone too, like if you have any family or friends in the area that are this age demographic, please let them know that there's ways to get outside that are fun and with our Monterey Audubon Society. But if you have any questions, come find me. Again, my name's Lulu.
Awesome. Thank you, Lulu. And that is a club that Monterey Audubon Society is sponsoring. So it's a club underneath of us meant to get more of the younger folks out. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Jake.
Thank you, Shannon. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jake Smith, Planning and Conservation Program Manager for the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District. It's really nice to be with you all and see so many smiling, familiar faces. Tonight I'll be providing a presentation and just a general overview of the Rancho Cañada Floodplain Restoration Project, which is a major endeavor of the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District. Just by way of a little bit of background for myself, my background, I received a bachelor's degree in environmental management and protection from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, studying hydrology and watershed management, and then made my way up here to the Monterey Bay area for the CSUMB's Coastal and Watershed Science and Policy master's degree program. So this project's directly aligned with that interest. Spent a little bit of time with the Big Sur Land Trust before spending about 10 years at the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority as their conservation and GIS program manager, before about 4 years ago moving back here in the peninsula with my family, my wife, 7-year-old daughter, and 4-year-old son. Time is flying by. To be able to live here in Pacific Grove in the hometown. So it's really great to be here with you all. It's great to be working for the Park District and doing conservation here on the peninsula and protecting and managing these amazing spaces, and to be able to tell you all about this major work. A little bit of background for the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District. We are a special district. We're 50 years old. We manage about 14,000 acres of land, stretching from essentially the Salinas River, and our jurisdiction extends all the way south to Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Parks. Some examples of properties, Marina Dunes Preserve in the city of Marina, that's our northernmost holding. Mill Creek Woodward Preserve, our original kind of flagship park on the Ranch Regional Park. Of course, Palo Corona. And then we have a series of smaller properties that are managed in partnership with local entities like Lock Patton Wetland Community Park, which is managed by the city of Marina. The Park District helped acquire and piece together, as well as Laguna Grande Regional Park, another example of urban open space that we jointly manage with the cities of Monterey and Seaside through a JPA agency as well. So the Park District has a long history, many properties. But this project in particular is really interesting because the Park District really hasn't engaged in this scale of restoration before. It is the largest, most complicated, most expensive project in the district's history. And you'll hopefully see from this presentation that it's taken many hands and many partners to help us deliver this. So tonight, my goal is to just provide a little bit of an overview of the park or the project, its rationale, and then an update of construction. We're right in the middle of our second year of construction, and I'm really excited to be able to share updates. So just the project at a glance, the restoration project is a process-based restoration effort transforming a former private golf course into a resilient and rewilded river corridor and public park along the Carmel River. It is a unit of Palo Corona Regional Park now. This project is led by the Monterey Peninsula Regional Park District. The current project cost just for construction is $35 million. It's being constructed in 3 phases. We started in June of last year. We are now in phase 2, which started in April. So generally we're working during the summer from about, late spring till fall. And then we'll be doing a third, very minor phase next summer. So we're really going through the second major half of it. Scale of the project, we're looking at a significant length of river corridor. Some people say a mile. Some people say we're doubling the length of the river after the restoration. It's a very large landscape scale project. You look at it at a map and it really doesn't do it justice. For those that have been at the park, you can take in the scale, especially those who've walked up to Inspiration Point and looked down. It truly is awesome. In total, we'll be creating and expanding over 38 acres of annually inundated floodplains. So these aren't lands that are inundated, every 5 or 10 years. These are lands that are inundated for months every single year to create ecologically significant frequent inundation and habitat. And we're moving 660,000 cubic yards of soil, which sounds like a lot because it is. For reference, that's the equivalent of a football field 30 stories high with the amount of material that we're moving around the park right now to be able to make this river function. Just to provide a little bit of reference of the location. So the property is highlighted in orange right there. An old exhibit shows as 185 acres. Last summer, we actually acquired 40 more acres. That was the missing link in between the 185 acres and the remainder of the 4,500 acre portion of Palo Corona Regional Park. So it is now linked together in one unified landscape. And really the key portion of this property, aside from the major opportunity to restore it and the rare opportunities to restore land like this on the river at this scale, retire its water rights and dedicate it back to the river. So the water rights that the golf course are using are actually dedicated for the river and the flows in the river, preserving that. It's also a really important linkage in between connected open space as well. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So a little bit of background, it was an intensively irrigated, actually 36-hole golf course, one of the highest water users on the river. I believe it was second to Cal-Am at one point in time. So it's a significant draw from the river. And when you suck water out of the groundwater table, that lowers the water that's actually flowing in the river when those two things are connected. And that was the case here. Today, it is a public park that was opened in 2018 and an active restoration site for this restoration project. It was acquired originally by the Trust for Public Land, which is a nonprofit land trust that was able to bring private capital in a very short period of time to be able to close and acquire this from developers that were otherwise going to be able to sell it for residential purposes, acquire it, and then essentially hold onto that property and then help us write grants to state agencies to be able to purchase it from Trust for Public Land. So in 2018, we were able to raise $10 million in state funding to be able to acquire this property, and we've been managing it ever since. So the challenge with this property as a former golf course. Essentially, the main challenge is that the property has been significantly modified since its historic condition. The valley floor, the river itself, the river was a very, very shallow, messy system. So it didn't really have a defined channel that was dropped down the landscape. It was very wide, shallow, messy, historically described as an impenetrable morass of willows and riparian woodlands. Over time, those lands were developed for agricultural purposes, I believe originally livestock, and then artichokes, and then eventually the golf course. And then that took a very, very wide riparian forest that stretched across the floor in a very spongy, wet environment, and then basically turned that into a very narrow corridor, narrow riparian woodland. And then over time, trying to keep the river within that corridor, it started to dig down lower and lower. And what that did was take this wet, spongy landscape, dry it out, all of these lush riparian species, basically getting pulled back to a very narrow area, and then dropping the groundwater table down as well. So where the groundwater was just very shallow underneath the ground surface, dropped down about 15 feet or so. So the surrounding area, a lot of the aquatic and riparian plants weren't able to self-sustain, self-replicate, and reestablish the next generation. So really what we were looking at a lot when it came to mature riparian forests was a legacy of those that were kept alive with irrigation water for the golf course or established during wetter times. And so, the results of all of this was a simplified, constrained, and narrow river, and that really limited habitat diversity, reduced flood management capacity, so the river actually wasn't able to break out of its banks normally and fan and distribute its energy and its waters and its sediment as a healthy and functional river would do. And so through the acquisition, the $10 million in acquisition and then dedication of these waters, we essentially conserved the stage and then dedicated the water for a major restoration project. And this was identified as a part of our general development plan for the park that was created in 2018 through a community-based planning process. And the main priority overlay and project for the park was restoration of the riparian corridor as a starting point. So in 2020, we commenced this effort formally in partnership with the Conservancy. And this is important because it's an important landscape. Many species depend on it, whether it be steelhead that are on the brinks of not being able to recover, not being able to move safely up the Carmel River watershed, up along the Carmel River, being subjected to really, really significant flows that are pulsing down this narrow channel and not having access to side channels and refugia and safe habitat for being able to feed and be able to get out of the way during those larger events. Amphibians like California red-legged frog, depending on complicated off-stream ponding features to be able to breed and be able to move around. Birds relying on the forest and surrounding upland areas for critical live-in and migratory habitat. Species like mountain lions, which we see relatively frequently at the park, to be able to hunt and move through this corridor. So the property location essentially connecting the San Lucias all the way to Jack's Peak and hopefully in the future to Fort Ord National Monuments, an important aquatic and landscape linkage for wildlife as well. And we as people rely on this property for provision and protection of our water supply, flood protection by providing space for the rivers to be able to deposit its waters away from areas where it can do the most harm, and doing so in areas where it can do the most good, nature-based recreation opportunities, biodiversity protection, and many other ecosystem goods and services. And as I mentioned, this is a critical link in a network of open space. You'll see this map where Palo Corona is shown in dark green right here. We have Point Lobos Ranch, which is also known as Shinta State Park. This is the Rancho Cañada unit. And then you can see how this property butts right up against Carmel Valley Road. There's actually a wildlife or there's actually a stormwater culvert that wildlife are using to get under Carmel Valley Road to be able to move through these areas. And so this is a really important pressure release valve for wildlife. So for example, during the Sobranes fire, we're actually observing black bear moving from bird to degraded habitats and trying to go north as far as through Port Ord National Monument to the Salinas River and back in, just trying to find new habitats. So the importance of maintaining these corridors and connectivity is really essential. And this project also builds on decades of conservation and restoration investment. Large projects, including the San Clemente Dam removal project and restoration project there, and then hopefully the forthcoming Carmel River Free project led by Big Sur Land Trust and Monterey County as well, which is just downstream. Essentially, we're trying to expand and connect and restore this open space to improve the corridor, remove bottlenecks, and be able to provide more habitat, more park space, more community connections. So just say a little bit more about our restoration approach. So generally, we use four main principles to guide our decision-making: using historic conditions as a guide, restoring the fundamental natural processes that confer resilience. And by resilience, I mean the ability for something to be able to respond back from stress, whether that be drought, flood, disease, basically providing the processes that allow a river to adapt and move over time and be able to maintain something called dynamic equilibrium. So the river system currently is out of balance, and we're providing space for it to be able to evolve and take care of itself over time. And when I talk about using historic conditions or history as a guide, this is a picture of the property and the river itself. You can see the wide riparian forest, the sandy channel along the Carmel River, and you can see just faintly how the river has been moving and evolving and shifting over time in that space. This was taken in the 50s, so this is a significant underrepresentation of what it was, but it's a great image just to let people see what was a narrow, wet channel into something that's much more diverse, much more dynamic, and provides much more space for the river to be able to adapt and move with these big pulses that come through as well. Also, one of our principles was to increase habitat diversity, complexity, and connectivity, and strengthen community connections and connections to them, and growing the benefits that people receive from nature. Some people call them ecosystem services. It's essentially all the important thing that nature provides us free of charge when you have a healthy, functional environment. Just to go over a little bit of the project area. So this is a rendering of the future condition. It's not existing condition. Many people that have gone up to Inspiration Point will probably recognize this thread. This is the main stem of the Carmel River right here. None of this forest is here right now. This is a very, very narrow riparian corridor going along the river. And what we're looking at for historic conditions, I was saying it was a very shallow, wet, messy system. We were originally looking at the opportunity to bring this lowered river channel back up to the surrounding ground surface, and in doing so, provide the river the ability to fan out over the adjacent area and also bring the groundwater table up. But after we evaluated that, we found that it would actually increase flooding with some surrounding development. So we can't always go back to the historic condition of what we see as the best functional condition. We need to provide something that fits within our community. So through this framework of stream evolution, we found that the next best thing was to actually assist the river to go where it already wants to go over several hundred years. And that's essentially creating a broad inset floodplain. That's excavating the land down around the river. So the river over time wiggles and moves and eventually moves material and clears out space. That takes a lot of time. It can be a little bit messy. You're not exactly sure when and how it's going to happen, what that material is going to do downstream. And so we had the opportunity to essentially fast forward the river to that next highest condition or state, which is called a stage 8 channel, and create this inset floodplain. In doing so, also creating all these side channels and backwater areas that provide really great niche habitat and refugia for many of the species that I outlined, and then essentially doubling the length of the river that's flowing through the property from 1 mile to about 2 in total. For reference, we're expecting this to increase the annual inundation on the property by the river 5 to 8 folds on any average year. Just this year, we saw approximately 6 months of continuous flow in the restored floodplain in phase 1, which is really great. You'll also see in this network orange line showing conceptually the trail networks going through the park. Historically, there was 4 golf court bridges going over the property, very dilapidated, under capacity bridges, very, very low within the floodplain. In 2023, I was standing on it and feeling logs hitting the underbeams and seeing the floodwaters go around either side, which was a little bit dodgy. So we're removing a lot of this derelict, underbuilt infrastructure, getting out of the floodplain corridor to give the river more room, getting rid of concrete golf cart paths that were designed for a 36-hole golf course and not a public park, and then right-sizing all this infrastructure to be able to fit within this future condition. And that includes constructing a new 265-foot-long clear span bridge rated for 10-ton vehicles over the river with approach ramps. You're looking at essentially a football field length long bridge going over the river in one location, raised out of the 100-year floodplain, and then removing again those smaller bridges and then replacing it with this new trail network and all. In total, the new trails will comprise a little over 3 miles of new trails designed for this new landscape that we're contouring. I was mentioning removing material from the floodplain, the 660,000 cubic yards. We're then placing that in surrounding upland areas. So you can see some gentle shading here. Again, folks that are on Inspiration Point will probably see this, or hiking down South Bank Trail. This is one of the mounds. We have another one here, and we're basically using it to put in upland areas to be able to serve as the foundation for future park improvements, to be able to buffer the park from noises that are coming from Carmel Valley Road, to separate the park view shed from adjacent developments. Some of you have probably seen kind of a rather sizable mound from our Discovery Center looking out towards the future Rancho Cañada Village housing development. That wasn't an accident. That was to essentially block the park views and create kind of a wild sense of place there. And then to be able to create new recreational terrain like this elevated overlook, and then up in the upper portion of the label for Carmel Valley Road, locations for future facilities like potential enclosed off-leash dog parks, overflow parking lots, restrooms, or even facilities to support district operations. So what this did was allow us to save truck trips on the roads. It allowed us to save a lot of money from disposal of the project and be able to beneficially reuse this to be able to support the park going forward. When I talked about the phases of construction, if you're to draw a line right here, you'll see the clubhouse and parking lot that many of you have accessed when you come to the park. If you're to draw a line straight down the center of the map, phase 1 was this western left half. Phase 2 that we're doing right now is primarily this right half, this eastern half. There was a little bit of activity rebuilding this all the way through June, but in late June, we opened up about 3/4 of a mile of new trails in this unit of the park. So there's now a new trail that goes from our parking lot, runs down here, runs down to another bridge that we acquired in summer of last year on that acquisition I mentioned. And then this trail alignment that connects to the South Bank Trail is open. So you have some new trail options for those that haven't been to the park in a little bit. And so, like I mentioned, connecting communities to nature, we're trying to create wild, resilient, accessible nature. 3 miles of new trails across the restored floodplain. We're aiming to create all of it to be ADA accessible and meet ADA grades, so everyone can be able to get out on the trail. It's really exciting to see people out on strollers and wheelchairs on the property already, again, on the new trail network. The large bridge for pedestrians and emergency vehicles. And also, this network is going to serve as a spine of the segment of the California Coastal Trail that extends from the Carmel River south to Garapata State Park through the remainder of Palo Corona Regional Park. So this property, this project, these bridges are the gateway to Big Sur and the California Coastal Trail. And then hopefully amazing nature overlooks and interpretive opportunities, already seeing the park shape up. Some of this elevated terrain is providing great overlooks into the wildlife corridor without people having to get inside. They can actually view a lot of the wildlife as well, being able to look down into the pond complexes as well and be able to take in the species that are occurring there. So all of this is really emphasizing and building a park user experience around nature and nature-based recreation. So some numbers, let's throw around some numbers. As mentioned, one big number is 660,000 cubic yards of material. And I said a football field 30 stories high. We're planting 175,000 native plants throughout all the project phases. That consists of over 30 native plant species that we've been collecting and propagating over the last few years. Any trees that are removed, it's not specifically mitigation, it's just for a point of reference. For every tree that's removed, we're planting 35 trees for reference. So in total, 10,000 trees are being planted on the site of the native plant species. The length of restored phase 1 Carmel River extending over a mile, and then the 38 acres of restored floodplain habitat. As I mentioned, it's a 3-phase construction effort. Phase 1 of last year is complete on the western portion of the site. Phase 2 is underway on the eastern portion of the site. And phase 3, which is a much more minor phase where we're going to be leaving in some berms that separate the main stem of the river from this restored floodplain, just to provide additional protection from any high flows that might be coming in, just to provide a little bit more time for it to stabilize. So it's still open to more minor gentle flows over that period of time, but just not opening up fully until we at least give it one complete year after construction to be able to get a little bit more revegetation in place. So how we made it happen. Here's the project timeline. As I mentioned, in 2016, it was acquired by Trust for Public Land. In 2018, we acquired the property. The floodplain restoration was identified as a priority in our general development plan. And then we formed immediately a project technical advisory committee, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail in a second. In 2020, a formal planning partnership with the State Coastal Conservancy was drafted and implemented, and we secured the design team. And also show the design team. In 2022, we got to 30% design. Then in 2023, we had 65% design. Submitting for permits, also get into some of the permit streamlining programs we've been able to take advantage of that were really important for this project to be able to move at such a rapid pace. In 2024, we were able to secure all $35 million in construction funding. We'll be able to get into those state and federal sources later. And then commenced in June of 2025. In April of this year, we started phase 2 and looking at probably early in April of 2027 in phase 3. And then on the fun part of ongoing park stewardship after this project in future years after that. As I mentioned, we had a deep bench of partners and community members really assisting with this project. The Park District is leading the construction phase forward now, but all the way through design and permitting. And even today, as an advisor and close friend, the State Coastal Conservancy still is a co-lead on this project. So that's through the state California Natural Resources Agency, one of the agencies. It focuses on coastal conservation and restoration, and has just been a fantastic project partner to be able to expand the Park District staffing at a time where they're low, and to be able to continue to be a great partner as we continue to kind of build up our capacity internally. This takes many, many different areas of expertise, including engineering and design, environmental consultants. Obviously, you need a contractor to be able to construct this, which comes with an army of subcontractors as well. So Tiger Construction is currently constructing the project. An army of monitoring, whether it's cultural, biological, you name it, engineering, building compliance, ongoing monitoring at the site, basically full time across the board. Plant propagation as well, takes specialized consultants to be able to collect and propagate this material. So as I mentioned, these 175,000 plants were all collected in and around the Carmel River watershed. And so collecting the cuttings, collecting the seeds, basically cultivating the container plants. And then for the seeds, which is really cool, you actually plant fields with the seeds and then harvest the seeds that are grown as the crop. So we're able to take hand-collected seeds and turn it into over 4,000 pounds of seed material that's being used for planting at the site as well. And then also community partners. The Park District is a very small agency. We really lean on and require our partners to be able to lift us up and drive us forward. And some key examples are the Big Sur Land Trust, the Santa Lucia Conservancy, Trust for Public Land, Trout Unlimited, CSU Monterey Bay, the local tribes, and truly many, many, many more partners. One component of the partnership is our technical advisory committee. And one of the things that I mentioned we started in 2018 was forming this TAC. So actually getting many of the thought leaders, regulators, academics and experts on river restoration in at the ground floor of this idea. Essentially, the idea is, how do we restore this section of the river, and then bringing them along throughout the process and leveraging their expertise, relationships, making sure their priorities and needs were reflected in this project as we were going to be looking to them in the future for permitting and funding requests. And so this really has been the project's primary secret sauce, has been a really excellent technical advisory committee process that really built up a coalition of supporters across the board, not just within the community, but all the way up and down the west coast of the US. And really the role was to build a shared understanding of project goals, really develop those, get buy-in, resolve conflicts before they became permitting barriers. Oftentimes people would design projects and try to push them through permitting processes rather than working with the regulators at the front end, which we did, which really facilitated things on a short time frame. And then aligning on acceptable outcomes and understanding that this is a big project. It's a landscape scale project. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of questions when you partner with nature, and getting comfort with that uncertainty to be able to move at this scale. And that was a really, really great thing, is getting a lot of buy-in on this type of work, seeing the value, seeing the uplift, and providing conditions for the river to do what it does best rather than prescribing certain outcomes and trying to hold it exactly to that condition. And so essentially, the outcome was accelerated permitting, reduced rework and reduced re-engineering, agency buy-in, and confidence in the approach from the start. And that extends into the permitting front, as I mentioned. So the state and federal agencies have also created programs under the moniker of cutting green tape. And essentially, the purpose is to reduce barriers for voluntary restoration projects that are of significance to the state, wildlife agencies, and are helping address this climate crisis. So the project used many of these streamlining programs, and that's why we were able to essentially in 5 years go from initiation all the way through permitting and funding, which is kind of breakneck speed, honestly, for these types of projects. Being able to use CEQA exemptions in the California Environmental Quality Act, and then use a lot of these programmatic permits that are designed to basically have a very, very fast permit development process, a list of predefined best management practices, not just to represent those agencies' interests, but they also strive to make those conditions talk to other agencies' conditions, so you don't have mutually conflicting requirements, and there's some synergies and efficiencies there. So that's been really important. Now, what you gain in speed, sometimes you lose in a little bit of conservative provision. So as I mentioned, we always have on-site biological monitors, on-site cultural monitors to be able to make sure that we're not missing anything. And that provides the agencies with the comfort and assurance that we're continuing to be a responsible entity and their programs are being rolled out effectively. But these cutting green tape programs have been essential for our project. Some folks are probably familiar with the Carmel River Free project, the restoration project downstream. That project is an amazing project, but was initiated under an old permitting framework, and that has caused a lot of delays and time associated with that. So we've been very, very fortunate where this project started right as these programs came online, became capable of qualifying for funding right as major federal and state funds were coming out, grants were coming out at the same time before they dropped off very quickly. And being able to essentially move forward at a time before construction costs exceeded the engineer's estimate as well. So we moved very quickly, very focused, very organized, and we were just able to get everything under the finish line. So I mentioned funding. Just for project construction, $35 million, and 13 of which is coming from the State Wildlife Conservation Board, another agency under the California Natural Resources Agency that invests in land conservation and restoration and biodiversity protection. $10 million from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, National Coastal Resilience Fund, which is the largest award in that grant around for any project, just to give folks an idea of how important this project is even nationally. $6 million from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Office for Coastal Management, and then $6 million from the State Coastal Conservancy. Again, our planning partner as well brought their own dollars to bear on this. Just to mention, as we're talking about increasing, attracting this amount of funding, that's the first problem. The next thing is, how do you actually pay the contractor if you're paying and then being reimbursed by these grants? And when you're looking at $1, $2, sometimes $3 million monthly invoices, the financing cost can be really, really expensive. So another great thing that was offered to us by the grantors was providing us advance payments in large chunks of these grants to be able to pay out these invoices. So we're not fronting the expense and paying for the financing. These agencies are providing us with these resources. So again, another example of a really important program for small agencies and entities to basically punch out of their weight class and be able to do bigger projects. So a little bit of update on construction results. Phase 1 was completed. We demolished many of the former golf cart paths, one of the golf cart bridges. We excavated over 250,000 cubic yards of soil, removed quite a bit of riprap, just a funny name for boulders from the riverbanks, and that's essentially just allowing the river to be able to move and migrate, where it was all armored and reflected with this riprap. One thing that you can do aside from excavating the area out is removing this armoring. So over time, the river can keep evolving and working within this space. We installed a temporary river crossing, created quite a bit of backwater channels and alcoves where water can spread out during the high flows, which I'll get into a little bit further. Planted over 80,000 native plants across the phase 1 area, and then also seeded and mulched many of the disturbed uplands. And so when people are walking down the South Bank Trail, they're familiar with the park, you'll see pretty large lupin bushes, native grasses coming up. Those lupin bushes actually came up from seed just last year, and they're about this large. So we're seeing a lot of great germination and growth, and we're factoring lessons learned from phase 1 into the phase 2 of the project that's underway right now. And just to show, the river's already using its floodplain. I was out there the morning of Christmas Day and was able to see the river just start to back out and flood into the floodplain itself. It was quite a sight to see it to start enter into a pretty, flat, sandy space that felt like a construction project, and you were wondering what was going to be happening in the winter and what it was going to look like. And then immediately you really saw this pulse of life starting to go through the property. So that image to the right is the project, I think in late December or early January, you kind of took just a generally flat area, planted with natives, and the river is just starting to claim this space, move around the sand, create sandbars, gravel deposits, and really create it into a living dynamic river that was flowing all the way until June. This is creating, again, active side channels. The backwater areas are holding water, creating shallow habitat. We're seeing excellent plant growth and recovery after the winter flows. This could be perceived as a disturbing event. These plants are adapted to these types of events. So species that were buried with sand are popping back up again. Where there's locations of scour, we had cuttings that were long enough for the roots are being able to hold on. And we're really, really encouraged to be able to see the resilience from the plants even from 1 year. And we're also seeing some really promising results from responsive wildlife. You'll see up on the screen, that's a mountain lion footprint taken within the floodplain area, I think in February of this year. Excuse me. And early use from wildlife is an important indicator that what we're doing is the right thing to do. And this isn't a construction zone transitioning into habitat. It was and continues to be habitat, and wildlife are returning and utilizing it in new ways already. Aside from mountain lions, we're seeing deer, bobcat, coyotes, really you name it when it comes to small mammals. Lots of amphibians, tadpoles, just black mats of egg masses from tadpoles throughout the new floodplain area. We're seeing swarms of flies and insects over some of the side channels and water bodies, and seeing birds swooping through and feeding from those, and seeing a lot of birds coming back to the project area as well. And that's while we're just getting initial growth from these plant species. Let's see here. As phase 2 begins, again, we're expanding east. The picture on the right is actually a photo of the phase 1 emergent planting area. So just to kind of get a sense of the diversity and beauty and the growth that's happening just in the first year. There are locations where there's sandbars where the river's moving forward. There's these quiet water, backwater areas that provide room for a lot of these rushes and sedge beds and everything like that. So we're really creating a diversity of habitat niches and spaces. Phase 2 is really expanding the same type of work from phase 1. One of the differences is it's now on the north side of the river as well on the east side. So as you're going down Carmel Valley Road, you'll see a lot of bare dirt on the north side of the river. That's one thing that's unique about phase two. Another thing that's unique is we're installing a major bridge. It's about a $4 million superstructure right now. We are having the bridge manufactured in Colorado in 5 different sections. I'll be coming out in September. Right now, we're driving down the sheet piles, basically these large metal sheets, into the ground that you can excavate to put in the piles for the footings for the bridges. That's underway right now. And we're expecting to start place that structure in September, which is going to be really exciting. And that's going to be the eastern access point on the property to be able to provide for that loop trail network. And looking ahead, restoration does not end at construction. As we approach phase 3 next year, which is substantially a pretty minor phase, in June of next year, we'll be opening up the majority of the 3-mile network of trails. The public will be brought back onto the property. There'll be some areas that are closed for this minor work, but in fall, everything will be open to the public. But then after that, we have a lot of ongoing stewardship, monitoring, ongoing management of invasives, to make sure that this property is continue to benefit from this investment of establishing these natives and creating a healthy and resilient stream corridor. One example of that work, Josh Carpenter, our resource conservation specialist, standing in the back right there, was just working with the California Conservation Corps throughout the month of June. It contributed over 1,600 hours of staff time to remove non-native invasives by hand. Invasive Cape ivy, many other species within the phase 1 area. And we need to, and we hope to continue that type of work and also bring the community into that work and continue this active planting as well. And, ongoing monitoring is going to inform how we're approaching stewardship. Are we able to get a leg up on the invasive species and be able to establish these native species as well, plant species I'm speaking to? The river is going to continue to do what it does best, which is shape the river corridor. We're essentially giving the land back to the river. We're giving space for it to evolve, move sediment, move its water, provide flexibility to be able to respond to big and small events. Being able to move large woody debris in a way that doesn't block a single channel. It can fan out over side areas, deposited sediment, and be able to move around a lot of the native plant stock as well to be able to continue the recruitment and regeneration of tomorrow's forest. And this is all working towards a vision of a self-sustaining river ecosystem embedded in a connected landscape that doesn't require nearly as much active intervention to maintain itself. Our district was founded on the premise of light touch, passive open space management, light touch facilities. And the management of this golf course and these facilities has been a major effort for our district, just for public safety, keeping some of these facilities going. So getting this back to a much simpler natural landscape with less facilities and a condition where the river and the property is taking care of itself in a much more functional way helps our agency free up resources and also move on to other things too. So with that, it's the closing of the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I really appreciate all your attention and time. I do want to acknowledge that the Monterey chapter of the Audubon Society has been a partner of the Park District. Amanda Priest has been a key component of that as well, and it's been great to work with Shannon too on guided bird walks, whether it be at Laguna Grande or Palo Corona Regional Park, installing monitoring equipment, new novel monitoring equipment in some of those spaces, including Laguna Grande and Lock Patton, helping with bird surveys. And that's also through the contributions of all of you and all your members and being involved in helping that. So this is an open call also and request that we're going to need a lot of people to help us take care of this property and monitor its restoration success and see how wildlife are responding. It would be great to continue our partnership with the Audubon Society to continue that work going forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and also have a few videos that I'll give a try maybe later on. They weren't quite running correctly. It was just showing some of the restoration work over phases. So maybe after questions, if we have time, we can go that route as well. So firsthand. Great question. So we're expecting quite a bit of resettlement, especially after the vegetation provides more cover and structure. Right now, just the presence of water and some of the insects and kind of the primary production pumps are already attracting wildlife. We're also already seeing mountain lions and big cats and everything move in for hunting as well. But many of these plantings, essentially in this floodplain area, it is going to be a solid green thicket of cottonwoods and willows in a very, very wet, dynamic landscape that provides really great cover habitat that's really going to attract a number of different species, all the ones I outlined and more. And when it comes to a fire break, it is shown that expanded floodplains and wet floodplain services do help with fire breaks and community fire breaks. And so, you know, in some of the photos I was going to show and some of up on screen, just excavating downward, we were tapping into the water table, and water was coming up right from the ground and ponding right where we're hoping it would be and right where our original designs would be. So just the wet conditions there, but then a lot of these riparian species that are very, very wet and tapped into that water also kind of bolsters that further. It's not a silver bullet, but it's certainly a co-benefit of this work. Yes, sir.
Yes, we just moved to California and live in Hacienda. There's a bridge, and we're told was the Carmel River. It really looks like a stream now, not like a river. When I first look up the place I went, we were fishing. So yeah, there's fishing, but you have to release the fish. Well, it looks like a little stream. Really fishing in there.
Welcome to the Mediterranean California climate. Carmel River is a great river, and I think Steinbeck had said all the things that a great river should have. This year, it's unusual to see it flowing this late in the year. So what you're seeing is actually unusually high flow from a lot of the stopping the groundwater pumping. If you're in there in 2023, or even in December, you might have been here in December, it was under about 15 feet plus of water in a torrent. Correct. So there's a pretty big pulse, and kind of an atmospheric river that came through. And then in 2023, it fanned out over the whole landscape of the golf course, all the way up to the foothills and surrounded all the bridges, which was really fun and great to see. For Hacienda, what this does is, we're talking about flood benefits. This provides much more room for water to go during those big events. So example, in 2023, the waters that were flowing all over the valley floor would have stayed entirely within the floodplain. And then in some flood events, it actually reduces flood depths at Hacienda by up to a foot. And so depending on the flood severity, it could be the difference in between flooding and not flooding. It's not designed to be a flood control project, but it provides that additional buffer, and it's kind of counterintuitively actually benefits, reduces flooding upstream with your specific community. Yes, sir. I haven't checked on that. We haven't seen any steelhead. We have seen some fish. Our biologists weren't able to confirm the species, but also, looking at the pulse that was running through in January and earlier on this spring, so that the Carmel River was punching through, but I don't believe the lagoon has been breached, this spring or later, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure. I think in the past it has been, but I think there's a pretty complicated management and regulatory framework because of the importance for providing those grounds for steelhead and salmon to be able to kind of rear and grow up as well. Yes, ma'am. Sure. It's an example of another large-scale nature-based restoration project. The San Clemente Dam removal, it was a different approach to restoration, as I was kind of talking about us creating process-based restoration, where you're trying to provide some guardrails and boundary conditions and then letting the river do what it does best. The San Clemente Dam removal was highly engineered, and understandably so. They were locking in quite a bit of sediment that was being held behind the dam that they were removing. They needed to lock that in place. And they needed to excavate and create a whole new side channel. And they were creating these rock energy dispersal structures where they're going out and surveying them within tenths of inches. And then a major flood event passed through and then blew all that material out. And so rather than continuing down that path of prescribing and defining a bend here, a tree here, locked in at this elevation, we're providing basically a dynamic space for the river to be able to operate with some core processes. Yes, sir.
It does happen. It does catch some water. I guess my question is, where is it?
Sure. So it all eventually goes back into the river. So as it enters our property, it expands outward in both directions. And then eventually on the downstream end, before our downstream bridge, it enters back into the river. So it provides space for the river to fan out its energy, fan out and deposit sediment, fan out large woody debris that would otherwise be moving straight down that river channel, and then also be able to percolate and recharge that water back into the aquifer, and essentially then join back into the river. So we're not losing water from the river other than anything that's percolating, or just the additional evapotranspiration from many of the riparian plants that are being planted that are modeling the condition that was there historically. There was no downstream negative effects on flows. I'm trying to keep track of hands. I'm going to move my over here.
I appreciate how you for letting the river do it with the example of it. I did. I was curious about the scientific projection. The climate change forecast a lot about surges and flood events and everything. I'm the other direction of overcrafting, drought, and like not reaching sea, and that side of the spectrum, spanning of the river, and like if it
Yeah, a lot of that's outside of our control. So the one thing that we could do was dedicate hundreds of acres, feet of water rights that were from the golf course, and then retiring those and allowing that to stay on property. And so that groundwater flows. And actually, since 2018, we've seen increased longer flows like we're seeing this year as a result of that reduced groundwater pumping. And then there are agencies that are working to make sure that proposals for groundwater pumping and relocation are done so in a way where it's not dewatering the river and it's actually reducing impacts on salmonids. But there's the belief that the river will dry up in stretches as well. So it's a very dynamic system. But one thing that we can do is protect the groundwater on site, weigh in when there's groundwater applications and kind of changes and proposals to be able to make sure that impacts are known. And then also just kind of work with partners when it comes to just trying to make sure that the property is flowing well and we're doing the best that we can to make sure that it's not impacting nearly $50 million of investment just on this property alone.
Follow up, there's significant development, as you know, for one project at Denver Ranch, which is kind of the ice storm disaster. And the other one that's been approved, Ranch there. It's like that kind of development alone could mitigate a lot of the benefits of what you all are doing. Picture
Yeah.
I appreciate your ratio of 35 trees for 1 month. I'm wondering if everybody can that.
It's just voluntary restoration. And for our strategy, I mean, we are actively, tracking proposals for changing pumping along the river in the vicinity of our property to make sure that that's not going to create a cone of depression, basically dropping the groundwater table and drying the river. So we're working with CalAm. We're actively tracking and working with Rancho Cañada Village housing development, Rancho Cañada Ventures as well, and reviewing the scientific reports and kind of studies to see how any changes in well operation and locations may or may not affect stream flow conditions. And a lot of it comes down to the intensity and timing of the pumping as well. And so if you can time it in the right way, it can be done so during a season where it's not drawing down something that's being supported by groundwater base flows. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so we're realigning our trail network so there's a more parallel river experience. So we're trying to actually get people under the big trees, under the tree canopies, being able to view the river. We're not providing direct trails down to the river corridor. Now, in any major park, whether it be Garland or Palo Corona, there are social trails that are established, and sometimes you de facto adopt those because they're also supporting operations. I wouldn't be surprised if we, allowed for some social trails that were done in a location that also met maybe the water management district's monitoring equipment needs, and done so in a way that was, appropriate, but it wouldn't be something that we're actively advertising for and kind of attracting people down to or including on our trail maps. Yes. I'm trying to think of any other major proposed restoration projects further upstream to the east. Right now, the missing link in between our project and the Carmel River Lagoon restoration that was done in the early 90s is the CR-free project. And so that is taking the old Odello farm fields that's separated by a levee and notching that levee so that gives space for floodwaters to go, to catastrophic floodwaters to go, rather than going into the Rio Road neighborhoods and Barnyard and Crossroads. So that is a nature-based solution. That is a floodplain restoration, but that is more for these more extreme, less frequent events. Whereas and then there's ecological benefits there. Our project is trying to create annual, frequent, widespread inundation with more incidental flood benefits. So they're similar efforts, but different aims and focuses. Okay. Yes, sir. They're not involved in the project directly. Does the project influence the golf course? We haven't evaluated what would happen if they change their pumping and what that would do for the river flows. We're just operating within what we could do within our own space. So for example, as we're talking through how changes the pumping and location can influence the river, there's quite a bit of more experienced and appropriate agencies to track and weigh in on those type of technical proposals, like National Marine Fisheries Service and the Water Management District, but that isn't a space that the Park District has engaged in.
But he was wondering about observing that before a while. I'm just wondering if that's
That's a great question. So the Park District's actually working on a property-wide habitat conservation plan with the United States Fish and Wildlife that will cover all of our maintenance and operations. Some members have probably noticed the weeds are sticking around a little bit longer in the year, and some of our maintenance isn't quite up to par. That's because we're still working through this permit process with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The short of it is, yes, we are going to do more active management of that pond, but we need to finish irrigation of these restoration plantings first because we have such limited water. So our focus is with our small remainder of water that's focused on irrigating these plantings that are more in the periphery of the floodplain. And then once that water's freed up, we'll be able to use that for active pond management for sensitive species.
Well, thank you so much, Jake. That was incredible. I'm going to try something new tonight. First, just thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. And I want to ask if you enjoyed the presentation tonight and enjoy what we're doing, if you would consider dropping $5 in our donation jar on the way out as a thank you to us. There's also some envelopes back there that you could mail us a donation as well. But I'll let you all get up and enjoy the rest of the snacks and drinks in the back. And thank you again for being here.